What's up YouTube? I'm Vaughn and this is the Gear channel where we discuss collectibles, hobbies, competitive games from tabletop to video games, and today we're back with another Know Your Policy series, and today we are reading chapter 4, Infractions, which is very important to know because these are all the examples that show you how you could receive penalties, and also there's a lot of examples in this specific chapter, so this is going to be probably the longest chapter that we read yet, just because it just gives judges all the information that you have to spot for infraction, so you give the appropriate penalty for. And also there's definitely going to be a lot of stuff that's point out and confirms what sharking really is. So looking forward to reading this policy, especially the specific chapter I'm super excited for. But before we begin, friendly reminder as always to like and subscribe because it really helps the channel a lot and I do really appreciate it. So for chapter 4 infraction, we're going to have severity, we have procedural errors, we have the 1, 2, and 3, which is warning, game loss, and match loss. We have Tardiness, which consists of major and strict, which is game loss and match losses. That's usually involving when it's the 3-minute mark, it's a game loss, and then when it's the 10-minute mark, then it's a match loss if your opponent is not seated yet at the appropriate table. Then the deck and decklist errors, minor, warning, and then major game loss. And then we have drawing extra cards, so DC, warning, game loss. And then we have F mark cards. Okay, so we have warning, game loss, match loss. We have G slow play, which is warning, and then we have unsporting conduct, which consists of warning, game loss, disqualification severe, and also disqualification cheating. So before we begin, friendly reminder as always to like and subscribe because it really helps the channel a lot and I do really appreciate it. So let's get right into it. So we're gonna click right here. Okay, chapter 4, infractions. Infractions are error in gameplay and or violates of policy. Most infractions are considered to be unintentional errors rather than deliberate actions. If a person commits an infraction, a judge must apply the appropriate penalties because there are degrees of infractions with different levels of impact on the event. There are corresponding degrees of severity for penalties. The different categories of infractions can have different penalties administered depending on the severity of the infractions. Judges must follow the guidelines list below and not create or implement new infractions. So A, severity, so minor, the subcategory will be penalized with a warning. Okay, major, the subcategory will be penalized with a game loss. Strict, the subcategory will be penalized with a match loss. Severe subcategory will be penalized with a disqualification, and cheating subcategory will be penalized with a disqualification as well. So severe and cheating are the exact same. So procedural error. This category covers infractions involving general play errors a duelist might commit during the course of a game. There are 3 subcategories for procedural error, minor, major, and strict, which indicate the severity of the infraction. So number 1, procedural error, minor, warning. This penalty is appropriate for minor infractions where the problem can be easily corrected and does not have a significant impact on the tournament. So here's some examples. So it's PD minor. Both duelists forgets to resolve a mandatory effect, and the game state is repairable by a judge. Since both duelists are responsible, they each receive a warning, which is very true. So if someone forgets the Sanja, it doesn't matter whose card it is. Mandatory effects, both players have to pay attention to that. Okay, a duelist attempts to summon a monster while an effect prohibits him from doing so. A duelist accidentally changes the order of the cards in her graveyard. Now, this is one that should be removed because a lot of events are no longer allowing question to be eligible for tournament play. So because of that, you don't really see that much of an issue. And we have seen live matches as well, especially involving tier and Seiju that on live stream, everyone did screw up the order of their graveyard. So this is something that I think should be removed because it can easily be manipulated as well, and especially that we don't have other cards like question that it's very important to keep the order of the graveyard. So yeah, I think this should be removed. That's my personal opinion on it. A duelist shifts the position of a card on his field when he has not been directly to do so by a card effect or game mechanic, which is very important. A duelist rushes his main phase 1 straight into declaring an attack from his monster without notifying his opponent that he is changing his phase and not giving his opponent the opportunity to respond changing of phase, which is very important because a lot of people do this while time is running out. But don't forget, even if you're a turn player, you need permission from your opponent to enter in the next phase, okay? So duelist neglects to agree on the location of a field center before beginning the game. Yeah, I think that's actually very important to actually note. Duelists are not keeping paper record of the life points. A duelist normally summons a monster and then attempts to retract the moves. Yeah, that is not allowed. Okay, and that's not sharking. So if someone says like you can't take back your play, that's not sharking. It's literally in the policy that you can't take back your plays. That's the whole point of Yu-Gi-Oh. It's like chess. When you let go of your piece, it's like and you move it. That's it. You can't take back your plays. So a lot of people like or say, oh no, that's just like sharking. It's like, no, it's not. It's literally right here in the policy. You could clearly see that Konami is telling you that you can't take back your plays, especially at sanctioned event, okay? And remember, that includes local tournament. If you want to practice and take back plays, then practice with friends. As soon as you enter in a tournament, no. A duelist does not communicate clearly with his opponent. A duelist does not fully reveal a card that was retrieved from her deck, graveyard, etc., an effect that searches for a card. A duelist activates and resolves the effect of Path of Greed, while Spell Counselor is face up on the field. Both the duelist and his opponent can identify the two cards drawn, so they return it to the top of the deck. So yeah, that's one important thing to actually note. And these are all warnings, okay? So they're not game losses. But yeah, if cards are accidentally drawn, it will be placed on top of the deck. Definitely will receive a warning, but the deck is not shuffled. And I see many times people is like, oh, shuffle it into the deck. It's like, no, that's not how it works at all. So procedural error major, game losses. This penalty is appropriate for major infraction that causes an irreversible disruption to the current game and can impact the timely progress of the subsequent rounds. The game is beyond repair, so the penalty must be significant. Okay, a duelist shuffles his hand into the deck by accident. A duelist forgets to pay a maintenance cost and doesn't catch it until a few turns later after she realized she would have run out of life points during a previous turn. The duelist responsible for submitting the match result slips puts it in the pocket and leaves to get food instead of handing it to the scorekeeper. After 5 minutes have passed from the end of the round, the missing slip is delaying the pairings for the next round. A duelist forgets to discard down to the legal hand limit at the end of the turn, which is 6. During his opponent's turn, he plays a card that draws a card. There is no way to know which cards the duelist had in his hand prior to the drawing the card. This is not a missed mandatory effect, but a mandatory game mechanic. This action is irreparable and it is appropriate to give the duelist a game loss. Now, let me tell you, I was in a situation like this. My opponent had 10 cards in the hand, and yeah, definitely they did not do the appropriate judge because what they did was just had the kid discard cards at the moment now instead of like receiving game loss. So that was dumb, and especially that he decided to keep some cards that there's no way he would kept because those cards were like impactful for like the current game, like at the point now, but not like prior. Well, all those cards would have been like irrelevant. So yeah, definitely agree with this policy 1,000%. So 3, procedural error strict, so match losses. This penalty is appropriate for infraction that causes a duelist to be unable to finish the current match. A duelist determining they determines they will be unable to finish the tournament itself, they should notify the scorekeeper to be dropped from the event. Example, duelist spills water on the deck and damages her cards, which makes it impossible to finish the current match. A duelist loses his deck in between matches and does not notify the scorekeeper until after the round has already been paid. Now you're probably like thinking, wait, no, there's like greater ways to get like match losses, but you have to understand like, so ideally you're supposed to get warnings, and then for the examples or for like the game losses as well in the match, whenever something accumulates, that's why it starts upgrading towards like game losses and match losses. But it goes into details like how or why someone will receive a warning and not a game loss, and especially if it's stuff that is like repairable and it's not a intentional one as well. So this is something that you have to like pay attention, is that if it's unintentional, and also like if it's their first offense, okay, like they're going like, no, like the judges are supposed to be like reading and follow all the guidelines and give their appropriate like penalty for the infraction. So that's why like it's doing like the example, and you're seeing like, okay, there's definitely like way worse stuff that should be added for match losses, but a lot of those times those have to do with like accumulations of those infractions. So all those penalties are getting like upgraded. So C, we have tardiness. So this category covers infractions prevent a duelist from beginning their match within the specified time frame allowed by the tournament. There are two subcategories for tardiness: major and strict, which indicate the severity of the infraction. Tardiness penalties should never be upgraded after repeat infractions. Since tardiness penalties are never upgraded, tardiness penalties are not required to be entered in the Konami Tournament Software (KTS) or the Konami Card Game Network (KCGN). So tardiness, major game loss. This penalty is appropriate when a duelist is not their seat and is ready to begin after the 3 minutes have passed from the beginning of the round. Example, a duelist is not in his seat and ready to begin within 3 minutes into the round. A duelist sat at the wrong table and played the wrong opponent, and in the mistake was caught after the 3 minute mark of the round, but before the 10 minute mark. A duelist fails to build and or register his deck within an allotted time frame during a sealed pack event. Tardiness strict now, so match loss. This penalty is appropriate when duelist is not in their seat and ready to begin after 10 minutes has passed since the beginning of the round. Examples: a duelist is not in his seat within 10 minutes of the round. A duelist sat at the wrong table and played the wrong opponent, and a mistake was caught after 10 minutes mark of the round. And then finally, a duelist received a marked card minor infraction and was not instructed to replace the marked cards before the next round began. The duelist was unable to replace the cards before the 10-minute mark in the round. That's also another thing, and this actually does happen because if your sleeve was like damaged of the prior round, you have to replace it, and you didn't get new sleeves because you didn't have a spare. That's also another thing. Yeah, I had to drink some coffee. Throat was dry. Okay, finally, so D, which is deck and deckless errors. Okay, so stands for DE. This category covers infractions associated with registering incorrect content of the deck list or playing with an illegal deck. If an error that would result in an illegal deck or deck list is caught prior to the start of the first round, it is acceptable at the head judge's discretion to correct the duelist deck list without applying a penalty, which is good to know actually. That's actually very important to know that the head judge could actually decide not to give a penalty if it's the first round. So that's good. There are two subcategories for deck error minor and major, which indicates the severity of the infraction. So deck error minor, this penalty is appropriate when a duelist realizes they have an illegal deck or deck list and brings it to the attention of tournament staff before the tournament begins. This penalty is also appropriate if any deck list content needs to be confirmed. A duelist accidentally records 2 copies of a limited card on her deck list, but brings it up to the tournament official prior to the start of the round 1. So these are all warnings, by the way. So just to keep in mind when you're reading this. So a duelist has 39 cards in the main deck and can add another tournament legal card to bring the total to 40 before the tournament begins and brings it up to the tournament official prior to the start of round 1. A duelist arrives at his match and prior to presenting his deck to his opponent to randomize, realize he forgot to remove side decks from the previous match. The duelist must restore the deck within 3 minutes window or risk an additional penalty for tardiness. A duelist has accidentally shuffled an extra deck card into his main deck and draws it from his deck during the game. He should show the extra deck cards to his opponent and judge, return the extra deck card to his extra deck, and draw a new card. Good to know. For a second, I thought it was like show the extra deck to the opponent. No, so you just show that card and then you draw an additional card. So it's just the start of the game when you're drawing 5 cards. So a duelist handwriting is impossible to read, and a judge is obligated to clarify the name of a card or cards by checking with the duelist. And I have actually seen people like receive greater penalties because of this, but yeah, make sure it's like printed, so don't do like cursive or like print it off a dueling book. Just remember that it's only 18 slots, okay? So if you play more than 18 different monsters in your deck, then you have to do 2 deck lists on dueling book, okay? A duelist unintentionally registers a card incorrectly during sealed pack play and errors is caught during deck construction. The duelist that registered the card pool should receive a warning. Okay. A duelist is playing with a legal foreign language version of a card but does not have a translation kept outside of his deck, which is very important. A lot of people don't realize that. It's like you still need a copy of an English version of it if you're playing a foreign one. A duelist enters an event with a card he did not realize was counterfeit. The duelist should be allowed to replace the card with an actual version of the card and receive a warning. Standard tardiness penalty will apply. If the duelist cannot replace the card, the deck list should be corrected as described in the deck list error section. Okay. Deck list error, major game loss. This penalty is appropriate if a duelist registers an illegal deck list. A duelist has an illegal deck. Okay. So the deck list does not match the content of the deck, and the duelist does not catch the errors and notify a tournament official before round 1 begins. If the duelist has registered a legal deck list, but the deck is illegal and or does not match the deck list, the deck list takes priority over the content of the deck. In this case, the deck should be fixed to match the deck list. Yeah. That's very interesting because I know as a fact that if you forgot your extra deck, okay, and this actually happened to a friend of mine. Was like he forgot to like write his extra deck, okay, so he had to play with no extra deck and he was playing branded. So forgot to play his extra deck and he was playing branded with no extra deck. And that's a real thing. Like you have to follow the deck list that you wrote. So yeah, it is the duelist's responsibility to obtain any cards needed to match the deck to the deck list before continuing gameplay. If the duelist does not have access to the necessary cards, the duelist may add only enough cards to the deck from the side deck to make the deck legal. Then correct the deck list. If the duelist is not using a side deck and cannot make the deck match the deck list, the duelist cannot continue in the tournament and should be dropped from the event. If the duelist registers the wrong card names in the deck list and the card written is the official Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG card, then the deck list is still legal. The deck is illegal and should be fixed to match the deck list. If the duelist does not have access to the listed cards or is unable to legally use the card in the portions of the deck, synchro monsters listed in the main deck, etc., then if the main deck total is still legal, fix the deck list. If the main deck total is illegal, the duelist must use cards from his or her side deck to make the main deck legal. If the duelist is not using a side deck and cannot obtain the necessary cards, the duelist cannot continue in the tournament and should be dropped from the event. If finding the necessary cards makes the duelist, what was that kind of like, okay, there we go. If finding the necessary cards makes the duelist more than 10 minutes tardy for the match, the appropriate tardiness restriction penalty would apply in addition to the deck error game loss. If the duelist has registered an illegal deck list but the deck is illegal, a judge should ensure the duelist fixes the deck list to match the deck. If a duelist registers the wrong card name on the deck list, and the card written is the official Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG card, but the card is a forbidden card, then the deck list is illegal. If the deck is legal, the deck list should be fixed to match the deck. If the duelist has registered both an illegal deck list and deck, a judge should ensure the duelist fixes the deck first by removing all illegal cards from the deck, forbidden cards, OCG cards, etc., copies of limited, semi-limited cards, etc., then fix the deck list to match the deck. If removing the illegal copies makes it so that the deck is still legal, no additional cards may be added to replace the illegal cards from the duelist must correct the deck list. So that's saying pretty much like when it pointed out the side deck, that means that they're going to have to play around with the cards that's provided on the list, and then it is what it is. So if it turns out that you end up not having a side deck anymore, yeah. If removing the illegal copies makes the deck illegal, the duelist may add only enough cards to the deck from the side deck to make the deck legal, then correct the deck list. Cards may not be added to the side deck to replace the transferred cards. So that's one thing to actually know. If the duelist is not using a side deck and cannot make a legal deck, the duelist cannot continue in the tournament and should be dropped from the event. If the deck check has already been performed in which the deck list has been verified as legal, the deck list cannot be changed. In this case, if the deck does not match the deck list, a judge should ensure the duelist fixes the deck to match the deck list. If the duelist does not have the access to necessary cards, the duelist cannot continue to the tournament and should be dropped from the event. Okay, now here's some examples for majors. Okay, so all of these are the game losses. So let's see. Yeah. Okay, so first major is if both the deck list and the deck are legal but do not match, a judge should ensure that the duelist fixes the deck to match the deck list. So that would be a game loss. A duelist has 41 cards listed in the deck and has 41 cards in the main deck. A duelist lists the limited card 3 times in the deck list. He also has all 3 copies in the main deck. The 2 legal copies of the limited cards should be removed from the deck since the duelist now has an illegal deck 39. He must choose 1 card from the side deck to add into the main deck. The deck list should be fixed to match the deck. A duelist has 42 cards in the list in his deck list and has 42 cards in his main deck. The duelist list is a limited card 3 times of the deck list. He has all 3 copies in the main deck. The 2 illegal copies of the limited card should be removed from the deck since the duelist still has a legal deck 40 cards. He may not modify his deck. The deck list should be fixed to match the deck. A duelist has 39 cards in the main deck. The duelist will add a card to the main deck from the side deck. The deck list should be fixed to match the deck. A duelist forgets to remove side deck cards from the deck in between rounds. An error is caught after the deck has been presented to his opponent for randomization. So that's also another thing to know. A duelist registers bombless Mirror Force, Stardust, etc. on her deck list. Their name can indicate more than one card. The deck list should be updated with a full name of the cards she is playing. So that is actually very true. So like, what was it? Mystical Space Typhoon. For a short period of time, people were playing like MST, and then they said that you're not allowed. A duelist registers Blacklist a soldier on her deck list. When her deck is checked, the duelist is playing Blacklist a soldier and Warrior of the Beginning. If Blacklist a soldier and Warrior of the Beginning is not on the forbidden list and is an actual card in a Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG, the deck should be fixed to match the deck list. The duelist must play a Blacklist a soldier, the card name of the deck list, which is true because there is a card that's just called Blacklist a soldier. So that's also a big issue. So make sure you put the full name. Drawing extra cards. So this category covers infractions associated with drawing cards from the deck outside of when a duelist is allowed to do so. So there are two subcategories for drawing extra cards, minor and major, which indicate the severity infractions. Drawing extra cards, so DC minors, which is a warning. This penalty is appropriate when a duelist has drawn cards from the deck when not allowed to and do so, and then the cards can be clearly identified by both duelists or logically identified by a judge. This penalty also applies to situations in which cards are accidentally revealed. The cards should be shown to both duelists and then returned to their original areas in their original order. Okay, so DC minor. A duelist accidentally draws a card when not allowed to do so, but does not add the card to her hand. A duelist accidentally draws a card and adds it to their hand. A judge is able to logically identify which card it was drawn due to this effect and have already been played. So a duelist accidentally knocks over cards from the top of the deck. A duelist going first in the duel accidentally draws 6 cards instead of 5 cards for his starting hand. Since all the cards are drawn from a randomized pile at the same time, it is where is it? It is appropriate to return a randomly selected card from the top of the deck. The card should be shown to both duelists. Wow. Okay. I'm not too crazy about that. Like, shown to why it's private knowledge. So for me, that makes no sense that your opponent would get extra information, but then again, you also got extra information. Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. Okay, so good to know. If you draw 6, then you have to shuffle, randomize, and then wherever card was picked, both players see it, and then it goes back on top of the deck. So pretty interesting. Didn't really know that, but okay. So drawing extra cards, major, which is a game loss. This penalty is appropriate when a duelist has unintentionally drawn cards from the deck when not allowed to do so. The cards cannot be clearly identified by both duelists or logically identified by a judge. Drawing extra cards when not allowed to do so damages the game state and must carry a heavier penalty. A judge should always attempt to recreate the situation to logically determine which cards were drawn. If the judges are or both duelists are not completely sure which cards were drawn, this penalty applies. Example, a duelist accidentally draws an extra card via an effect and adds it to their hand with no way to correctly identify which card was added. A duelist resolves an effect that searches for a card, selects a card from his deck, and then adds it to the hand without revealing the card to the opponent. Neither the opponent or the judge is able to positively identify the card that was added to the hand, which is true, especially if like your opponent just shuffled their hand after adding. There's not really a way to identify it. Okay, So that was example involving drawing or even adding. So now F, marked cards. So this category covers infractions involving marked cards and or sleeves. These markings are considered to be unintentional. A card or sleeve is considered to be marked if it can be distinguished from the other cards containing in the deck. While this cards are face down, marking including but are not limited to dirt, edge, discoloration, creases or tears, flimsy texture, damaged corners, shifting within sleeves, etc. Marking can occur on the card, the sleeve, or both if the duelist's responsibility to maintain unmarked cards and sleeves throughout the duration of the tournament. Marked cards infraction apply to all cards in all decks, including main deck, side deck, and extra deck. Okay, well, side deck I get by extra deck. Okay. If the deck is double sleeve, marking apply to both the inner and the outer sleeve, which is very important. There are three subcategories to four marked cards: minor, major, and strict, which indicate the severity of the infraction. So, example for marked cards minor, this infraction and penalty is appropriate when duelist has minor markings on one or very few cards in their deck that shows no significant patterns. Okay, so if the marking are on the sleeves, the duelist should be required to change the sleeves so that the entire deck matches. If the cards themselves are marked, the duelist must replace the card. If it is appropriate for a judge to allow duelists to change the sleeves in between rounds as to not hold up the current match. Okay. It is important for judges to understand that patterns should not be presumed merely because the cards marked are good cards. Okay, that's very true. A duelist has two random sleeves in his deck with minor wear and tear. The two cards in the sleeves bear no pattern. Yeah, that's true as well. A duelist has three cards in his deck with minor bends that can be notified through the sleeves. The three cards bear no pattern. Okay. Marked cards, major game loss. This infraction and penalty is appropriate when a duelist has significant number of cards marked and a judge knows there is a significant pattern. This infraction and penalty should be applied if the head judge determines that the pattern is significant and intentional and unintentional. My bad. Okay. It is appropriate for a judge to allow a duelist to change the sleeves in between rounds as not to be hold up for the current match. Although this infraction assumes the marking is unintentional, any markings on a card or sleeve can give a significant advantage to a player, so it carries a heavy penalty. It is very important for the head judge to investigate further to make sure that the markings are not intentional. So, examples. A duelist has 12 sleeves with a wear and tear on the top left corner. The marking is on 8 of the 12 spells in the main deck. The head judge determines that the marking are accidental, caused by the way the duelist holds the cards. The duelist should receive a mark card major and replace the sleeve once the match concludes. A duelist has 14 normally sleeve cards upside down in his deck. During the mid-round deck check 10 of which of the monster cards. The head judge determines that these were duelist graveyard during the previous game, and the duelist unintentionally shuffled them back into the wrong duration. The duelist should receive a mark card major game loss, which is very true. So if you have your cards upside down in your deck, that is actually a mark card. A duelist has three cards with additional wear and tear on the top left corner. The marking is on the only three trap cards of the duelist's main deck. The head judge determines that the marking were made accidentally based on how the duelist handles his face down spell trap cards. The duelist should receive a mark card major, which is a game loss, to replace those cards and replace those cards. A duelist is final example. A duelist is playing with cards that has been altered from their original manufacturer's state. The alteration makes it so that the duelist/judge is unable to determine which card it is at first glance, or the rarity has been altered from how it was manufactured by Konami. The duelist should receive a marked card major, so game loss, and replace the card. Now, let me tell you, so this has to do mostly with alternative art. So like painting and all that. So there is lots of rules that you have to keep track, okay, especially with those. So there's definitely weight that has to be considered as well. So if you alternate it to a point that it actually changes the weight, that's not good. So any like art that has like thick coats of like paint are not allowed at all. A lot of times, if it's like drawing that enhances like more like the image, like some wings like outwards, and not cover any of the taxes, those are usually the ones that get by, and especially if they're done by like Sharpie, because Sharpie doesn't really have that much weight, like pretty much like no weight at all, that would make a significant difference. But something has minor like major layer of like paint would. So these are things to actually know. So if you ever are consider of like custom like cards, then that's one thing to like know and watch out for. So mark cards, strict, match loss. This infraction and penalty is appropriate when a duelist has a significant number of cards marked and a judge knows a significant pattern. So this infraction and penalty should be applied if the head judge determines that the pattern is unintentional. Okay, that's weird. Okay, yeah, unintentional. If this occurs near the end of the round or in between the rounds, it is appropriate for the head judge to provide an appropriate time extension for the player to mix the issue. Although this infraction assumes the marking is unintentional, any marking of the cards or sleeves that bear a significant pattern can give a significant advantage to a player, even if the duelist was unaware of the pattern. Okay, so it's doing examples of like if there is a pattern, like it's like three ash blossoms and they all have a mark, but the player wasn't aware of it. Yeah. Okay, so a duelist should be required to fix all errors with the cards and or sleeves before being allowed to continue play. It is very important for a head judge to investigate further to make sure that the marking are not intentional. During a judge, so this is an example. So during a judge call near the end of the round, duelist is found with 15 cards from their side deck that are warped. Upon investigating, the head judge determines that this was unintentional. The entire side deck is considered to be marked with a significant pattern. The duelist should receive a marked card strict match loss and will need to replace the cards or remove them from the side deck before being allowed to continue play. If the cards are being removed, the deck list should be updated accordingly. It is appropriate for the head judge to provide a time extension into the next round to provide the duelist with the opportunity to properly correct the issue. Okay, next example is during the mid-round deck check, a duelist is found with 6 sleeves of a slightly different shade of color than the color of the rest of his main deck. Upon investigation, the head judge determines that the player ran out of sleeves while sleeving his side deck, and that the entire side deck is currently using a different pack of sleeves than the main deck. And the duelist seems to be generally unaware of the difference. The entire side deck is considered to be marked with a significant pattern. The duelist should receive marked cards strict match loss and will need to replace that sleeve before being allowed to continue play. Okay, next one is slow play, so SP. So this category covers infractions associated with the pace of the duelist game. Okay, so duelists are expected to play at a reasonable speed. Keep that in mind. Regardless of the complexity of the game situation, and should not waste time. There is not a set amount of time a duelist may use per action, but they are expected to pace themselves accordingly to the complexity of the game. Slow play infractions are always administered. My apology. So, slow play infractions are always administered as a warning at first and then upgraded as appropriate if the infraction is repeated. Slow play is presumed to be unintentional. Intentional delaying a game or match is considered to be stalling and falls under the unsporting conduct cheating infraction, which is very true. So slow play minor warning. This penalty is appropriate if the duelist unintentionally plays slowly, causing a minor delay in the game. It is a duelist's responsibility to play it a reasonable pace regardless of how complex the situation may be. A time extension of at least 3 minutes should be given following a slow play warning unless the match has entered end of the round procedural. Okay, so good to know. Penalties assigned to slow play infraction that continues throughout the event should be upgraded. So SP major and SP strict can be applied only through an upgrade. A duelist, so these are the examples. A duelist is excessively slow while searching his deck with an appropriate effect and does not appear to be doing so intentionally. Okay. A duelist is excessively slow near the end of the match as the complexity of his upcoming actions may decide whether he wins or loses the current game of the match. Upon investigating, it is determined he does not appear to be doing so intentionally. A duelist repeatedly requests to see her opponent's graveyard or constantly requests a hand count during a given turn and does not appear to be doing so intentionally. Yeah, that I get. Like even other like games as well has that issue. It's like, can I see your graveyard? How much cards do you have in your hand? And like the dumbest one is probably like Digimon. When people like ask like how many cards do you have in your hand, it's like there's not one card that's like relative like with that question like at all. Like none. There is literally like none. If you're in like a situation like you like decide like oh like it's a factor of how many cards in your opponent's hand. It's like Digimon doesn't have that. Like the only one like maybe like Background Army since they actually discard and it's like a control deck. Maybe that's it. But then there's like so many like every other deck has nothing to do with it. It makes no sense when people like take the time and they're just like stalling with like dumb questions like that. Ugh, I hate it. Okay. So the next one, okay, so a duelist is excessively slow while taking notes or repeatedly pauses the turn to refer to notes taken in the current match. Upon investigating, he does not appear to be doing so intentionally. A duelist arrives at his table after 3 minutes have passed in the round, then takes an additional length of time to roll out his game mat. So rummage for his deck or otherwise gets set up in the game and slow plays penalty should be given in additional to the tardiness penalty. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. So like the 3 minute mark, like you have to be seated and ready. But for the match, the 10-minute match, you have to be seated. Okay. So a duelist repeatedly takes a long time to make decisions about which of his cards to play in a complex combo-based deck. Upon investigating, it is determined he does not appear to be doing so intentionally. Okay. So, and by the way, taking time of doing decisions in a combo deck is not the same as playing a combo. Like if you are actively doing combos and plays, that's allowed. That could take like you could take 40 minutes doing a combo, and that is fine. But if you're taking like 3 minutes deciding which card for your combo play, like every single action that you do, that is slow play. Okay, so a judge assigns an SP minor infraction and penalty to a duelist who has spent too much time looking through their opponent's graveyard. Later in the same round, the duelist again spends too much time looking through their opponent's graveyard. The judge issues another slow play infraction, notifying the head judge. The head judge verifies the situation and upgrades the second infraction to SP major, so game loss. So another SP major. Okay, now for some reason it's the same category for the example. So now we're doing SP major. So that's kind of weird. It didn't cut off. Okay, another SP major is a judge assigns an SP minor infraction and penalty to a duelist who took too long to decide which of his cards to play. During the next round, the same duelist again receives a SP minor for repeating, checking, and rechecking his set cards. The judge asks the duelist if he has received a prior penalty for slow play, and he replies that he has. The judge notifies the head judge, who verifies the situation and upgrades the second infraction to a SP major. Now we're doing SP strict. A duelist has already inquired an SP major, spent too much time studying their hand and their graveyard, incurring another slow play infraction. The judge notifies the head judge, who verifies the situation, upgrade the third infraction to an SP strict. Good. Now we're getting into the juicy stuff. Unsporting conduct. Yes, UC. This category covers infractions associated with inappropriate behavior from a person, usually but not always during a tournament. Unsporting conduct. Infractions are considered to be the intentional, okay? Unsporting conduct infractions may be committed by persons not enrolled in the tournament. Unsporting conduct infractions may be committed outside of the tournament. It is important for a person to understand what kind of behavior or not appropriate at an event, and for judges not to use common sense when investigating the infraction and administering a penalty. So while KDE encourages persons to have fun at the tournament, they are expected to withhold from engaging in behavior that may be offensive or that may ruin the integrity of the event. There are 4 subcategories for unsporting conduct: minor, major, severe, and cheating, which indicates the severity of the infraction. So 1. Unsporting conduct minor. Warning. This penalty is appropriate when a person commits a minor unintentional infraction. I was so used to saying unintentional, now we're seeing all the intentional infractions, okay? So the first minor: a person leaves trash behind his table after a match. They should have, you know what? More. Do this major. I am fed up when I go to regionals and I see people like they open the packs and they leave all this shit there. Like, this should be like severe. This like disqualified. Kick those guys out. So the pigs, kick them out. I don't care. Okay. Like the worst thing is that you go, there's pairings, you go to your table and when you get seated, it's all full of trash. Yeah. This disqualified them. Like, kick them out of the tournament. If they're doing that, like, no. Or even at stores, not even just regionals, even at card stores. Like, if you're doing that and you're leaving your trash on the table and all that, it's like, bro, what are you doing? Like, come on. Okay, a person eats or drinks at a table during a match. I don't see an issue. Well, eating definitely. I don't see an issue with like drinks like water. If you have your water bottle and you take a sip of your water, yeah. A person swears or uses inappropriate or offensive gestures during a tournament. Okay. A person insults a player, spectator, or tournament official. A person fails to follow the instructions of a tournament official. A duelist rule sharks her opponent by calling over a judge because her opponent does not have a translation for a card. The judge notifies that the duelist has a copy of the same card in her own deck and she therefore knows the card text. Like, I do agree with the intent. I don't like the example because I'm sorry, it's still your responsibility to have another version of the card. Like, okay, that person that has the foreign card, what happens if it's the next round and the opponent doesn't have an English copy? It would be the same situation. I think that's irrelevant if they have the same card or not. Even though she's fully familiar with it, it's like they have to follow the rules. So if you want to play foreign cards, you need another copy of like English or wherever you're like playing at. Okay, so a person is not currently engaged in a match does not move out of the aisle when asked to do so by a tournament official. A duelist is using an electronic device other than a calculator, a mobile device for an official function of neuron, or a device that is medically required during a match. Yeah, so this is something that's you have to like keep note on. So if you have any electronic device or anything that you need, okay, you always have to go to the head judge prior to the event starting. So, or TO. So if it's, and it could be anything, it could be even like a hearing aid. Yeah. A person that at an event is wearing clothing or using tournament materials, etc., with offensive or explicit imaging or words, the person must remove or cover up the offensive article or risk a penalty upgrade. Okay, so these are still all minor. A person without proper media clearance is recording a video at a tournament outside of the areas designed for the media content creations. Okay. A duelist appears a floor judge before the floor judge has finished answering the judge's call. A duelist requests an inappropriate penalty for an infraction committed by his opponent rather than letting a judge assess the situation and apply the correct penalty. And a person makes a deliberately unfair trade with a less experienced player. A person lacks of good hygiene negatively impacts the event. Sorry. But yeah, wash. Put deodorant. Do both. A duelist demands that a specific judge answers his judge call or refuses to accept the judge who does answer his judge call. A person violates the buying selling policy at the venue. In addition to the unsporting conduct penalty, the person may be required to leave the venue. This does not apply to a person who attends the event with the intention of violating the buying and selling policy at the venue, because I believe it's a much more severe penalty. While resolving a search effect that adds cards from his deck to his hand, the duelist removes a card from his deck and places it face down on the field, then removes a second card to evaluate his decision before adding a card to his hand. His opponent calls a judge and insists that the duelist must use the first card even though it was not added to the deck. Okay, so it's... Wait, what? Let me just see this. So, like, I believe like they're talking about giving the penalty to the person that's trying to shark, but let me reread it. So, while resolving a search effect that adds a card from his deck to his hand, a duelist removes a card from his deck and places it face down on the field. Then removes a second card to evaluate his decision before adding a card to his hand. His opponent calls a judge and insists that the duelist must use the first card even though it was not added to the deck. Okay, that is worded really wrong. I think what they're trying to say is that if 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 the person that's switching has put cards out to the side before choosing to add them to their hand, okay, then and someone tries to shark them and say like, no, you have to pick the first one. It's like, no, like you can't do that. I know you could. Are you ready? If they revealed it face up. So if they put it out face up, then they have to get that because that was private knowledge that they just made publicly. So they have to add that card now. Face down, no, because it's still all private. You're the only one that's having knowledge of it. That is allowed. You could put as many as you want, like out, like face down, just so you could see exactly which one you like choose. But as soon as you put one face up and you make it public knowledge, that is the card that you're getting. Okay, so unsporting conduct, major game loss. This penalty is appropriate when a person commits major intentional infractions. So examples, a person uses a profanity towards another person. A duelist throws over a chair in anger after losing a match. A duelist refuses to sign or rips up a match result slips. Okay, so I had opponents that done this, refused to sign it, or lost a temper at the judge. That was funny. Uh, yep. People don't like losing against me because usually I play like the worst decks in the whole world. Okay, and definitely not meta. That's also another thing. Okay, unsporting conduct. You see severe disqualification. That's me. This penalty is appropriate when a person commits a severe intentional infraction, but it wasn't even intentional. That's mean. Okay, you see severe and you see cheating or the most serious penalties a head judge can give. So you see severe infractions do not have to take place at tournaments. A person who is not currently enrolled in the tournament is not exempt from the disqualification penalty. If the infraction warrants a disqualification, the head judge may opt to enroll that the person specifically for the purpose of disqualification. This is useful if a severe infraction is committed by a spectator or someone else who was not originally enrolled in the tournament. A duelist has already dropped may also be reinserted into a tournament in order to be disqualified. The head judge will conduct an investigation of the infraction and may collect statements from the person and all parties involved in describing the infraction in details. These statements should be included in an official disqualification report form, which should be sent to the KDE penalty committee. Official Tournament Store OTS can download copies of disqualification forms from the OTS portal. Example, a person writes on or otherwise damages or defaces tournament or venue properties. A person physically or verbally assaults or threatens another. A person makes a racial or sexual slur against another person. A person intentionally misgenders another person. A person steals or assists persons who steals an item or items. A person severely or repeatedly harasses another person. A person posts a video accusing another person of cheating. Meh. I swear to God, if like that's like the only thing, we're going to keep reading. Hold on. A person enters an event with masking requirements and refuses to comply with the requirements. Okay. A person submits fraudulent proof of vaccination. A person promotes actions that are against tournament policy, such as creating a video to demonstrate how to manipulate a deck or while shuffling. A person behaves inappropriate on camera or live stream. A person attends a section event while intoxicated or under the influence of any substance that may be illegal on local, state, federal level. If a substance is legal at the state level but illegal in the federal level, the substance is not allowed at the event. A person brings a prohibited item to a sanctioned event or official event that is not allowed events FAQ or is illegal on a local, state, or federal level. If an item is legal at the state level but illegal on the federal level, the item is not allowed at the event. If an item is prohibited at the FAQ, an item is not allowed at the event, regardless of the state federal laws. You see severe, a person attends a sanctioned event that prohibits buying the selling items with the intent of buying or selling items with other people rather than approved vendors. So I guess it's only this one, which clearly they didn't watch the video because the video is explained the complete opposite of that. So yeah. Okay. Well, anyways, it's in a couple of days, so we're definitely going to appeal. Unsporting conduct cheating, okay, disqualification. So this penalty is appropriate when a person is caught cheating at an event. Unsporting conduct cheating and unsporting conduct severe are the most serious penalties a head judge can give. You see, cheating infraction do not have to occur at a tournament. KDE shows not tolerance towards cheating and takes his infraction very seriously. Cheating includes but is not limited to intentionally misrepresenting the game state or intentionally violating rulings or tournament policies. It is also included reporting inaccurate information or lying to tournament officials during an investigation. Bribery and collusions are considered to be cheating. That's very true. So here are more examples of UC cheating. So altering the deck, a duelist adds or removes cards from their sealed pack card pool during a sealed play. A duelist offers their opponent money, booster packs, or any other compensation for exchange of a win. A duelist agrees to intentionally draw a match. Yeah, this I hate when people offer me draws. It's like, no, the whole point that I'm there is to win. Okay, a duelist accepts a bribe in exchange for a concession, deliberately losing a match, falsifying a match result slip, misrepresenting the game state, etc. Okay, a duelist rolls a die to determine a match win. A duelist agrees to end a match in a draw. A duelist intentionally draws an extra card from his deck while his opponent is not looking. A duelist intentionally marks a card or cards in the deck when asked if they have received any previous penalties for an infraction. A duelist who has received previous penalties lies and says they have not. A duelist intentionally conceals part of her field in an attempt to influence the opponent's gameplay decisions, which actually does occur quite a bit. A duelist intentionally withholds information on how a card works to trick the opponent into revealing additional information to gain an unfair advantage. A duelist refuses to answer a question that is public knowledge. That is true as well. A duelist knows marking on. Oh, also, wait, let me just point something out. A duelist refuses to answer a question that is public knowledge. Let me tell you. A card that is revealed in hand and then put, or because it was searched or anything. You asking what's in the hand or if the card is still in the hand, that is not public knowledge. That is not private knowledge, okay? That is completely private knowledge, okay? Now, what you could ask though is the card that's searched, okay? Let's say it was like a Sanjan. If you ask what this Sanjan was searched, that is allowed. But asking for confirmation or anything in the hand, okay? That is private knowledge, okay? And that's why there's like specific on like notes of how to do notes. And this is why I discourage like anyone to do like notes because there's many things that you can't do and it's it's very much like a higher level that you need for like taking like notes and like specific because sometimes those notes could actually get you game losses, okay? But yeah, you can't ask what's in your opponent's hand or refreshing your memory as well because as soon as something stops being revealed, it's now private knowledge, okay? So the specifics on this, so I just wanted to point that out before we like continue. Okay, so where was okay, so a duelist notices markings on his opponent's sleeves, but waits until he is about to lose to notify a judge in hopes of gaining his opponent a game loss. Okay, a duelist deliberately shifts the position of a card on the field in order to influence a link summit. A spectator deliberately sends signals to a duelist during a match to convey information about the opponent's card. Judges will need to investigate before deciding the duelist to whom the signal was sent to also cheating. A duelist intentionally plays slowly in order to enter the end of the round. Match procedure. A duelist intentionally takes 3 minutes to side, knowing there are less than 3 minutes in the round to prevent the next game from starting. Aha. So when people say like, oh, well, I'm going to spend 3 minutes siding, it's like, well, yeah, that's actually cheating. That's full out cheating. And a lot of people do say that. So if you ever catch someone telling you that, call a judge right away, because that is actually full out cheating. And honestly, like, I find that's disgusting when people do that. Okay, like the whole point of like signing is like you have 3 minutes in case you need it, but you're not supposed to use up those 3 minutes. Okay, a duelist deliberately enters the tournament using a name or ID number that is not their own. Okay, so what was the? Oh wait, I kind of skipped. Okay, so yeah, I skipped one. So a duelist refuses to change phases in the game in order to enter the end of round match procedure. Okay. A duelist deliberately enters the tournament with a fake ID. Okay. A duelist falsifies a match result slip. A duelist alters the result of a match uh, after the match has officially concluded. Huh, that's interesting. That's like the same thing, but yeah, pretty much. And that was actually the last one. So our next chapter is 5, disqualification review. So this is definitely one that's very important to know, especially if you receive penalties. Like, what's the process, what you should be aware of, how do you go about. So that we're going to definitely get into next week. And that's it for chapter 4 of Infraction. Now, if you guys enjoyed today's video, you know what to do. Like and subscribe. And if you want a sneak peek of future products we're planning to review here on the channel, you can follow me on my Instagram, VaughnGear. I'm Vaughn, and this was the Gear Channel.